Yes, I just got a notification. We're live on YouTube. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. It's good to have everybody via Power Faith Radio with us tonight. And just let you know, Terry, the Georgia group text just a few minutes ago and said we're listening tonight. We're here, so it's good to have them and the others as well. If you're watching this video, maybe it's just a recording. While you're over there, please go ahead and subscribe to that YouTube channel. It's Outreach Noah, simple. And go ahead and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified every time a new video goes up. And if you want to find the links to our class, you can go over to a Simple Walk Facebook page, and it'll have all the links on the day of the class. And then also we ask you or challenge you or request of you to send us an email. Just send that email to outreachnoah@gmail.com. Terry, greet everybody if you would.
Greetings, everyone. Glad to hear and see and that everyone's here. Glad for you to join us again tonight on Outreach Noah. Scotty did an amazing job last week, and we're looking forward to part 2 on cultivating compassion here in the future. And have a little bit of time, get all of his notes, because I think he said he had a bunch more that needed to share with us.
Anytime an evangelist starts writing down notes for any kind of deliverance, thing, any kind, you think of days. You don't think of one night. You think of days. Evangelistic's always got several days involved. I won't get into that. When I was going to say, when I was growing up, weeks, not 2 or 3 days. So go ahead.
And then while you're speaking, you think of all the things you didn't think about.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, we enjoyed last week. If y'all weren't here or don't know, didn't know that Scotty was sharing last week, go over to Outreach Noah YouTube channel. Last week is on Cultivating Compassion Part 1. It is really good. Here in the near future, he'll be coming back and bringing us another part. He keeps writing these notes. He'll have a book, and we'll have a whole series on that before we're done, won't we, Scotty?
Yeah.
And so, and like we mentioned last week, that if you have any questions and things you would like Scotty or I to discuss, or and teach on, answer questions, whatever, send Scotty messages on outreachnoah@gmail.com and let him know if you have any, like I said, any questions, any subject matter that you'd be interested in. Just let us know. We'll be glad to help you out there. Well, it looks like tonight we also have Veronica is here. Veronica, are you still in North Carolina?
I am.
All righty. You heading north or south?
I'm probably gonna go west.
West. Oh, she can come for tennis.
In North Carolina.
She's going to stay on the quieter side of the Smokies. What it's called.
No, I might, if I get far enough west, I might just hop over and at least go see Scotty.
Yeah. Come over. We'll go out and eat.
Hey, you let us know if we can run up. We'll run up. Just about 80 miles. It's not too bad.
I'm trying to plan, so I'll let you all know.
Good.
All righty.
Okay.
Then we've got Amuela. I'm glad to see her here again tonight. And Ronald and Bob has joined us, and Warwick Marshall from New Zealand. It's been a while since we've seen you. Welcome back. Glad to see you. Looks like you're in good health there, Warwick. You doing good? That's good. Then we got Sabra and Thomas, and tonight we've got Fred has joined us, and Joanne, another one in North Carolina, up in the mountains. And of course, we got Will also from East Tennessee. He's about halfway between Scotty and I, somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably a little closer to Scotty than me, because I think he said Lenore City, something like that in that area. About halfway, I guess. And so we're glad, like I said, we're glad everyone's here. Power Faith Radio, thank you for joining in with us. And those who are joining us on the YouTube channel, you're welcome. Thank you for coming. As Scotty has said, if you want to come into the Zoom room, you're welcome to come at any time. You can go over to Simple Walk Facebook page. Scotty has got the links for how to join us. And I think Scott, you also post them on Ronald or Christie's site there, Australian.
Yes.
What is that, Ronald? How you say the full name of your and Christie's group?
Oh, Noah Hides of Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, you can, if you're over in that part of the country, in New Zealand, Australia, you can hit Ronald's and Christie's site up there. I think it's Ronald's and Christie's, right?
It is now.
Yeah, that's because I know she's doing good and back doing her little videos as well. So, but you can join us in our Zoom room at any time. You don't have to have your camera on. You just come on in and join us whenever you want. But again, thank you for coming. Scotty, are you about ready?
I am ready. I am ready. We appreciate everybody that's taking place in this Tzedakah time. I want to tell you about I know that the Creator, I'm going to describe it this way, is a miracle worker. He does things all the time. Things happen all the time around us. Sometimes it happens so much that we overlook it. We take it for granted. We don't catch on to the miracles that happen around us. I had a gentleman call me yesterday morning, and early yesterday morning. I was trying to get ready to head out the door for work, and he called me, and he was on the verge of crying, and he needed the Creator to do a great thing. Now, this gentleman is not of my faith. He's of another faith. And but he called me, and we've known each other for years upon years upon years. And so he called me, and I talked to him a little bit, and tried to counsel a little bit, and I said, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. I said, let's just pray that this thing will be fixed by tonight. It's got to be fixed by tonight. Now he's in a faith that believes in prayer and miracles, but he didn't think it was going to happen. And you know how we all always say things, I don't know what's going to happen or not, but I'm going to say it's going to happen. So he called me this morning early, and when I said hello, the first thing he said was, wow. Before I went to bed last night, it was done and complete before I went to bed. He said, I couldn't believe it. And he just said, wow. And I said, well, thank the Creator. Thank the Creator. So anyway, I just want to throw that in. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but it was completed. Hello, everybody. We thank you for participating in our Tzedakah time and just sending us names. And you don't have to send any funds in. We've got some dollars and some change here always sitting around the desk. We use those. And so let's get started tonight. So we can give Terry plenty of time to get into his lesson tonight. As always, we give tzedakah for our main teacher, Pesach and Shira Sherbo. And sorry, I just got a text from somebody. I got to send them a link. I'm sorry, guys. I got to send this link. Let me just send this link. Hopefully they'll come on in. Oh, give me just a minute. This is live. This is live here, and I got the link. I got the link up. And I have. Am I back?
You back?
Oh, here we are. Okay.
Nowhere.
I never went nowhere. You all did. I just so okay. As always, we give tzedakah for our teacher, Pesach and Shira Sherbo. They live in Spot, Israel, and then Jeremy Kibbe is still on our tzedakah list tonight. So we want to remember Jeremy Kibbe in his endeavors and his walk that he is attempting to do. Also, Carol St. George. She is on our tzedakah list tonight. And Kelly Conrad is on our tzedakah list tonight. Troy Milligan and family. We've still got him on our tzedakah list tonight and his family. Dean Hall is still on our tzedakah list tonight. And Janice, I'm going to get this. Is it Brandon? Who gave me her name?
Brandon. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ronald. I knew I was close. So we still got her on our list. And also Nadine Akins is on our tzedakah list tonight. And Pamela Steffi We still have Pamela Steffi. We're going to have her on our tzedakah list tonight. And Christina Hall. We still have her on our tzedakah list tonight. And someone contacted me just today and said, I want to send $1 in for Amuela Asher. So this is your dollar. They was just a conduit to send it in, Amuel, and they also sent one in for Veronica Port and one in for Thomas Schaus. Also tonight we have we got Wendell and Mary Parsons on our tzedakah list tonight. We got Ronald Dickman and sister. That's the way I put it because Ronald knows that I had hooked on phonics and I can't read my own writing. So Ronald, how you doing? And then how's your sister doing?
I'm doing very well. My sister up and down, but not quite as bad, but still serious. So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to keep y'all on our tzedakah list and in our prayers. And then also Fred Lee Rawls, we still have you on our tzedakah list tonight. And Warwick Marshall, you're on our tzedakah list tonight. It's good to have you here tonight. And then Chrissy Seaton, I know she is recovering great, but we just felt like keeping her on our tzedakah list tonight. Also, William and Tina Lyons is on our tzedakah list tonight. And for our blessed memory, and I'm going to hope I get this name correctly, Dove Bar Pedowitz is on our tzedakah list tonight. Would you help us pray? Hear our voice, Adonai, our God, Father of mercy. Have compassion on us and accept our prayers with compassion and favor. For we know that you are a God who hears prayers and supplications. You are our King. Do not send us away empty-handed. Favor us and answer us and listen to our prayers. Amen. All right, Terry, tonight I'm going to put you on speaker view, and then I'm going to sit back here, and if anybody's got any questions as we go, I'm going to just jot them down, and we'll get to a point where we will try to jump in and answer those. So let me get through here a little bit, and we got somebody else. Let's see, Linda from Michigan. Did I see that right?
Yes.
Is with us tonight. It's good to have you. Good to have you, honey. All right, Terry, I'm gonna get everybody kind of muted here, and then I'm going to turn you loose.
Scotty, you probably need to make sure you have a notebook down because probably over the next few weeks, you're probably going to be getting some questions. You good with that? And guys, feel free to let him have it.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Because over the next couple of weeks, probably going to be having some questions. We're going to be starting a series over the last year. And the year went by fast. I mean, we're already here in February of 25, and we've mentioned several times we were going to get into the book of Genesis. And it won't be the whole book. We're going to be taking a journey into at least probably the first 9 chapters and parts of them up to 18. Because it contains most of the material that we need as the part of God's creation that's called the nations in the scriptures. And that's, our part where we live. And there's a lot of information there that pertains to us. After you get past chapter 12 or so, it all pertains to Israel from the first word of the Torah on. But there's a lot of information in there in the first 9 or so chapters that pertains to us of the nations. And we're going to be getting into that. My primary sources for those who are interested in where I'm going to be getting this from is the Artscroll Tanach Series Bereishis for Genesis. That's Hebrew. That's Ashkenaz for Genesis. Bereishis. I'm going to be going over the next couple of weeks before we get into the text, the overviews. Anyone who's ever studied, I mean, these white books that you see right here is the collection of the books that I mainly study for from the Artscroll Tanach Series. Their overviews and introductions contains a wealth of information that will boggle your mind. And so I've got a 2-volume set just on Genesis alone. This is only 1 volume. There's another one the same size. And I think it's about 4,000 pages or so just on the book of Genesis. And there's a lot of wealth in here. Of course, I'm not going to be going through everything because not everything pertains to us, but I'm going to be covering information that we can glean from that it's more on a universal basis. We're going to be getting into some things. I'm going to be going through some stuff that the majority of the people out here that's not studied at this level have not heard. It's going to generate some questions, and we're okay with that because, I've come, studied this and learned this years ago. And some of it can be I need to think about that for a little bit because, one, we weren't taught this. Well, we're going to be learning about, here in the book of Genesis and some of this overview, we weren't taught, but the Jewish people has had this information pretty much almost for 3,400 years from Sinai forward. A lot of this information tonight we're going to look into a little bit of the overview. I called it the master's blueprint. We're going to understand that. And the master's blueprint talks about the written in the oral Torah. We may not get all the way through tonight with what I've got. So it'll be a part 1A. We may have a part 1A be next week because I do have some stuff I want to cover before we get into the text. And then as we get into the text, there's sections in the overview that I want to cover before we get into certain subjects that's in the text of Genesis 1 especially. And because it's stuff that's not really been taught to us, and there's been misinterpretations of the text because it was based on religious interpretation from non-Jewish sources instead of straight from the mouth of the people who got the book from the creator and was told what it said. So we're going to be getting in some pretty good stuff. I'm not going to get into anything deep, but it will be some areas that many may not have known. And just bear with us, join us, and learn, hang in there, grab your pen, grab your paper, take down your notes. If you want me to recover something, let me know. I'll go back and read it again. We can just stop and discuss as we go too. That's main thing for the class too, is let's stop and let's discuss things as well. Because I am going to be reading a lot. And if I need to slow down, we need to talk. Scotty, ring the bell, whatever. Let me know. Okay? Now, if I got y'all's interest. All right. Like I said, my primary books, I meant to say 2 books. This Artscroll Tanach series. And then we get into the text. I'll be using this somewhat, but I'll be getting into the Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch's Chamash, his teachings on Genesis right here when we get into the text, because he breaks things down. Like I said, sometimes he'll take some of the text word for word and breaks things down. When I first started studying his works, he was a Jewish German in Germany about 200 years ago. And his writings is amazing. And in his writings, he does include in places messages to us, the non-Jewish people, which I find very interesting, things we can learn from. And so, but these are my 2 main sources, and there'll be extra sources from here and there, but this is my 2 main sources for our study. All righty. In the Artscroll Tanach Series Bereishis, in the overview, beginning with what's called the Torah, written and oral, it talks about the written. This is a very, very interesting aspect here that I want you to gain. It's called the Master's Blueprint. It says here, he says, the well-planned building is built around a concept. We're going to be talking about just a physical building. The architect begins with an idea, and from that idea, his plan emerges. The intricacies of the construction may involve scores of contractors, hundreds of subcontractors, thousands of suppliers, tens of thousands of workers, millions of tools, parts, nails, and screws. There may be piping enough to stretch for miles, wiring to span the continent, but everything unfolds from that single concept. How many people will recognize the central idea in the finished construction? You ever walked into, a really nice commercial building that's really nice? Maybe it's huge, maybe like a museum. I know, like, Bob, from Chicago and stuff. When I was a little bitty kid, we went to some of the museums up there of natural history and stuff. These places are massive. Or maybe a skyscraper in New York, or, in bigger cities like, Atlanta. And you maybe even go to a football stadium, baseball stadium, enjoy a game. But have you ever thought about the intricate details of that building that you're walking in and getting to see? There's the things that are hidden underneath you'll never see. The rules that were made that rules the construction to make sure that it is a safe, proper building, that all the electrical meets code and the plumbing meets code and the concrete has to meet code because there's stresses that's put here and there. There's so much that goes into a major building. And even all of those same rules will come down to a single dwelling house today. All the same rules, the stress points. When I did heating and air, we started doing a lot of new construction, and I learned some things about houses that I didn't know until I started working with contractors. And they were showing me things when we were running our duct and pulling our wire where we could do certain things, because you can't cut this. You can't go there because the weight of the roof travels down this board over here and it comes back over this board and it runs down, and it does. So these points you can't touch, because if you do, it's going to collapse. And most people don't think about that. And that's what the writer here is talking about. How many people really think about the finished construction, what it went into? Most will know the location of an elevator and its corridors, the ones they need for their own particular purposes. They come to work every day for years and never know where the pillars are that is keeping thousands of tons of rubble from crashing down on them. Architects may visit the structure and marvel at it, but a layman will just wonder what there is to admire. Even in a simple, just say a parking garage made out of concrete, we park our cars in. We drive in it, we don't think nothing about it. And we don't understand the marvel of the constructing process to build just a parking garage, or maybe even a building. A storage building. There's things that has to be, adhered to. But architects may visit the structure and marvel in it, but laymen will wonder what there is to admire. The graceful strength of classic suspension bridge can be an inspiration to engineers and designers, but to the thousands of people who cross it every day will mutter about the delays and the strain to gain on a few extra seconds, and never stop to think that they ride on a tribute to human intellect. Just think about driving across some of these bridges that are amazing. And we complain about the traffic. We got to get here. We don't think about nothing, but yet the human intellect it took to design that from the first time one line went on a piece of paper to begin to draw it. To thoroughly understand a structure, one must know its plan. But it takes much training and uncommon brilliance to look through the thousands of pages of a blueprint and decipher the single unifying concept of which they all grew and which gives them all a meaning. But even without the ability to find the architect's purpose, every intelligent person knows that there is a purpose to the plan, and that the voluminous materials in the blueprints there is only to make it possible for the plan to take shape. Here you thought we were going to be talking about Genesis. Oh, we are. Now, this is talking apart. Now, understand this was all given to Israel. So even from in the beginning, all this was given to Israel as their heritage. It was their responsibility to take care of this. And so what I'm going to be bringing up, this first part deals with the complete issue from the Jewish standpoint. But we need to know this so we can see what we're talking about. He goes on and talks about the first and last. He says, praising for the Jewish people the Holy Sabbath day, which is not one that we have to observe as the nations, but it does have a place in the creation. But in praising the Holy Sabbath, Rav Shlomo says in his classic, Laki Dodi, the end of a deed is first in thought. The Sabbath was a crowning feature of creation, but it was not created first. See, for the Jewish people, this is where the priests spend their time, and it's called a castle in time for the priests to meet with God. But it wasn't created first. A home is built to provide living quarters for a family, but furnishings and interior decorations are the last things to go into it. A school is built to provide a study hall, but the book stacks and the desk and the chairs and the students will enter in only after the bulldozers and the bricklayers have long gone and left. The first thought of parents planning a home for their family is of a comfortable and wholesome apartment. Nevertheless, before the final goal can be realized, there is a long list of tasks that seemingly having no relationship to the goal, but they are indispensable to its attainment. Obtaining the land, engaging an architect, formulating a concept, reducing it to a blueprint, finding a builder, obtaining finances, and so on and so on. And finally, when all the work is done, that the original dream, a home, a study hall, has taken shape. God, too, and we're going to be bringing all this into the Creator's blueprint. God, too, created the world from a plan and for a purpose. Has this helped you begin to have some kind of idea when we look at what we understand in our own reality of the buildings and what it takes? Now we're going to be looking at the God level of the creation of the world. God, too, created the world from a plan and for a purpose. So we just open up the Bible and we go, and God said, let there be light, and there was. But the eons before he spoke anything into being, the blueprint was already developed and was in existence, as we're going to see. He created the world from a plan and for a purpose. His plan was the Torah, which we know is the first its first 5 books. On the basic level, it's the first 5 books, which Torah means instruction. But in the realm of Israel, Torah is so vast that Torah contains multiple of thousands and thousands of books that has come from the instructions of God given to them at Mount Sinai. We'll be seeing that as we go probably into next week when we continue on. His plan was the Torah which preceded the world. That's in the Talmud in Shabbos 88b. And his purpose was that man find the meaning and the goal of creation in the Torah. In the Midrash, it says, another one of the holy writings of Israel, he looked into the Torah and he created the world. Before the creation, the Creator drew up the blueprint, which was the Torah. Then he looked into the blueprint, and then he started assembling what he was looking at. And that's just human language to understand for what our finite minds can't comprehend. The Torah was the blueprint of creation. It is commonly thought that following the failure of the human race and the emergence of Abraham and his descendants as a people worthy of bearing, and we're talking about the line of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, that they were the only people that had the privilege to become God's chosen people. God decided upon the commandments which he transmitted to the Jewish people through Moses. Nothing could be more wrong. The Torah and its commandments were not designed in a response to the demands and the needs of earthly life. See, some people look at, well, God done this because what man done. No, the Torah was designed and established as a blueprint before there was anything, the mind of God. It was not in the response of human failure. Adam didn't just sin and then God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. No, the Torah precedes creation. So it was not designed by the demands of the needs of earthly life. The Torah preexisted earth and the universe as we know it. It was designed to conform to the requirements of the Torah. The universe and the earth, everything in the creation was designed by the requirements of the Torah. He gives an example, the matzah that Israel ate as they left Egypt. So matzah is a food that by its nature is prepared and baked in haste without the slightest delay. Therefore, God tailored the history of his people to conform to the nature of matzah. They were exiled to Egypt and emerged only through a chain of circumstances that required them to leave the land of their captivity in such a haste that their dough had no time to rise and to form bread instead of to rise and form bread instead of matzah. True. We say that matzah is a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt, but that too is ordained in the Torah, which precedes not only the exile, but the very creation. The events of the Egyptian exile and the aftermath after themselves, nothing more than a physical translation of a spiritual content of the Torah. So everything we read there is like he says here, is nothing more than a physical translation of the spiritual content of the Torah. Now, some of this stuff might be a little deep, Scotty. Anything going on? You got me? Okay. It was this very argument, and I read this to get to this point right here. It was this very argument which Moses advanced to the heavenly angels when they angrily contended that man was too lowly and too degraded to be given the holy gift of Torah. Moses answered that the Torah says, "Thou shalt not steal." But the angels have no need or temptation to steal. But the angels have no temptations or need to steal. The Torah commands, "Honor your father and your mother," but the angels have no parents. Surely Moses could not have meant that the Torah had no place in a higher spiritual sphere, as it refers to heaven. The Torah exists before the creation and is surely not dependent on man's puny efforts of his earthbound intellect. Indeed, it is clear that the angels studied the Torah on a level far beyond the human beings. Instead, Moses was pointing to the earth and to man as the instruments selected by the divine architect for the fulfillment of the Torah's demands. And that includes us. We have our share. The nations has a part in this. We aren't given the whole 613 plus, everything that God gave them, but we have a certain part to play in this because there are demands that are made for the nations to observe as well, so that the creation is complete. If God looked into the Torah and created the universe in conscience with its requirements, then the conclusion was inescapable that the Torah had to descend to earth to enable man to fulfill the will of the Creator. Had God wanted "thou shalt not steal" to refer only to spiritual meanings, then he would not have created a physical world with the temptations of wealth and the lasciviousness instinct to which human beings are prey. The thoughts of theft plague us every day, every moment. Had he wanted only angelic concepts of honoring parents, then he would not have brought into beings flesh and blood parents and children with a blend of friction and dependence, resentment, and love that makes the relationship at once difficult and beautiful, and that makes the commandment, "Honor your mother, your father," a constant challenge to children and parents. Precisely because the universe was I love this. The universe was a translation of Torah into a material manifestation of God's will. I'll read that again for those who might want to write it down. The universe was a translation of Torah, his instructions, into a material manifestation of God's will. Moses was able to convince the angels that man, God's handiwork, could not carry out his Creator's will without the Torah, which was not only the plan, but it's also the purpose of creation. Go ahead, Scotty. Got any comments on this? Because we'll move over to the next session.
No, everybody's, it's good. Keep
Okay.
right on going.
So we have the written Torah that we got from Mount Sinai that God gave Israel. He spoke it to Moses, and Moses wrote down all the words that he was told to write down. It did not formulate at Mount Sinai. It did not formulate because man messed up and God had to come and change some things. It was pre-written, pre-existent, before there was anything but God. We're going to get into that when we get into the first verse, because it's a very hard this is a very hard concept, because we only have an earthly existence. We don't have a pre-earthly existence to draw from. We do not have that knowledge. And the Torah was God's will pre the creation, when there was It's hard to even say nothingness, because even the rabbis describe it. To have nothing, you have to have something. And there was nothing. So this is a hard concept for us to grasp. And so for man to, like it says here, it says God's handiwork could not carry out his creator's will without the Torah, which was not only the plan, but also the purpose. So no, God does not do away with something that preexisted existence. He doesn't change that in which existed before existence. I'm using language here that's very difficult to comprehend, because we're going to be getting into that when we get into the very first verse here in probably the next week or so. Okay. Now, this is a very contested issue right here, but it's there. We're going to see just some small elements to help us understand. But along with the written Torah, the Creator gave the understanding of the written as an oral message. And we're going to be looking at that, because these are the two, that even the text within the Hebrew scriptures of the Torah and also of the writings from King David, there is the mention there that there coexisted the written and the oral. The written cannot be understood without the oral. It's impossible. So he said, write this down, but this other, he spoke to him as the understanding. And we'll see here, he passed that on to Joshua. Even a cursory study of the Torah proves that there must have been the unwritten law, that there is much more to the Torah than just the 5 books of Moses, what's called the Chumash. Chumash means 5. Much even more than the entirety of the 24 books of Tanakh. Following the war of Amalek, God told Moses, this is in Exodus 17, verse 14. Write this as a remembrance in a book and place it in the ears of Joshua. Write this as a remembrance in a book and place it in the ears of Joshua. This is the oral Torah. The writing was in words, for it was placed not in his hands, but in his ears. It is plain that in addition to the written verses of the Torah, something else was handed, something else had been told to Joshua. He was given the written, but he was also told. God told him, put this in his ears. The Torah prescribed that one who assaults his fellow must pay an eye for an eye. This is one of the most misunderstood passages in my book, because even the heathens uses this quote and totally has it wrong. It has nothing to do with you. An eye for an eye is a euphemism. It's a statement that one who assaults a fellow must pay an eye for an eye. Exodus 21:24. Yet never in the history of the Jewish nation was a physical punishment meted out for an assault. Instead, the verse always interpreted to require a monetary compensation. Who gave Moses and his successors to sanction to tamper the plain meaning of the text? On the threshold of Eretz Israel, the Jewish people were told that they would be permitted to eat meat without the requirement of bringing the animal as an offering to the tabernacle. How should animals be slaughtered? In Deuteronomy 12:21, it says, "You may slaughter from your herd and your flock, which Hashem your God has given you, as I have commanded you. You shall slaughter as I have commanded you." Moses says clearly that he had commanded his people concerning what's called shechita, the slaughter, the proper halakhic by law slaughter. Yet we find nowhere in the written text of the Torah, or even in the intricate and the demanding rules of kosher for kosher slaughter. We never find nowhere in the written text of the Torah even one of the intricate and demanding rules of kosher slaughter. It's very, very intense, the kosher laws. I've met some rabbis who that's what their job was to, I can't remember how you pronounce their name, but they're the ones who actually do the slaughter. The blade itself has to have a requirement. If there's even one small scratch on the blade, it cannot be used. It is sharpened to a point that when it's done the way God commanded them, the animal actually feels nothing. And the blood is drained out, and the heart pumps it out, and the animal goes to sleep, and it's never felt pain. Where they are cut and how they are cut severs no nerves, and the blade is so sharp, and it has to meet such requirements, and they have to know exactly how to do it so the animal feels zero pain. God cared for the animals so much that he taught Israel an orally lesson on how to humanly sacrifice or kill animals for food so that the animal doesn't suffer. The proper way to slaughter an animal is not in the written text. It was given to Moses, and Moses passed it on to Joshua's ear, and he passed it on to Israel. Now, countless similar questions could be raised. The implication of them is all clear beyond doubt that there is a second Torah. There is an oral law without which the first Torah is not only a closed book, but without which the written Torah can be twisted and misinterpreted beyond recognition, as indeed it has been done for centuries. We, the nations, did not receive the oral message. Israel alone, from Moses. Matter of fact, in one of the other, I'm going to just call it sacred writings, it's called Pirkei Avos, it's called Ethics of the Fathers. Chapter 1 begins the receiving of the Torah. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and handed it down to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets handed it down to the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly was 120 great men after the Babylonian captivity, which included many of the prophets. And so then it goes on from there, the delineation of teachings that came down. But the Torah has been twisted and misinterpreted beyond recognition by those of the nations through the reading of translations and ideologies of religions, and that dogmas and doctrines have been made that's incorrect, just like you see in the movies, an eye for an eye, boom, boom, you punch me, I punch you back. That's not what that means. It's monetary, because we weren't told, we weren't given the oral understanding of the Torah, and therefore we've made a lot of mistakes, and religions was made from these mistakes. But in the last days, we know that those mistakes are going to be, repented of, because we are told in the prophets and Isaiah that there are going to be people from the nations that will travel, many, to the Mount of God in Jerusalem, and he will teach us his ways and we'll walk in his paths. We're told in Zechariah 8 that the nations will come and 10 men of the nations will grab the corner of the garment of the Jew and say, teach us. We know that God is with you. We know that in Jeremiah, that it says that the nations will turn to God and say, we have been taught lies and vanities and nothing of profit. It's in Jeremiah. So we're told in the prophets there's going to come a time when the nations are going to recognize we messed up. And we are living part of that today. So many people around this world, there are thousands of people right now that are starting to flood back to Israel and knock on doors. I mean, I know one man, and Scotty and I and several here in this group here knows a particular person years ago. He sought conversion. He thought about converting like I did for a while, because when you come to certain things, hey, this is where I need to be, to only find out that God has a way of life for us in the nations that doesn't require walking with him as a priest, but walking with him as he created you. But this man went to Israel. He's a great teacher. He's one of, I call my elders. He's an elder. I've told him that he's one of my elders. And he went to knocking on doors back, I want to say 30, probably 30 something years ago or better, knocking on doors of rabbis and saying, hey, you need to teach me the Torah. And it says here, you're supposed to teach. And they go, what? And they were slamming doors at first because they wasn't used to that, Gentiles showing up saying, hey, teach me. And he's a great knowledgeable man. Like I said, I consider him one of my personal elders. When I have questions, I go to him and talk things out. And I have had, here about a year ago, I had some questions about a certain thing to make sure it wasn't an idolatrous issue. And he went through it with me. We looked at it, and he came to the decision, same one I did, but I wanted to make sure I was correct, that what I was looking at wasn't idolatrous, because I didn't want to violate the prohibition of idolatry in a certain thing. And so, but yeah, he went knocking on doors in Israel, rabbis, finding rabbis. Hey, teach me the Torah. What am I responsible for as a Gentile? And that was before a lot of this had come out, in the 80s. This was back in that time when some of the people were just starting to wake up to this. And now it's thousands upon thousands all over like tonight, we've got, New Zealand sitting here, Canada sitting here, and we got the United States sitting here. And we got people all over the radio station from Brazil. There's people in Singapore. There's a lot of people in the Philippines, tons of people in the Philippines and Russia that's doing the waking up to this. And they're seeing here that we didn't have the oral message of the Torah and we misunderstood it. It's not all our fault either. It's not your fault when you're raised in something that you don't know. But as you learn, there are those that you can turn to find out the answers here. It says the responsibility to transmit the oral law faithfully and for a chosen few of Israel's greatest scholars to be responsible for its maintenance and interpretation in each generation began with Moses, his own successors, as the Rambam, the Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides. Rabbi, got the wrong one. It's Ramban. Rambam is Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. He says in his own introduction, Moses had three primary disciples: Joshua, Eleazar, and Pinchas. But it was to Joshua, who Moses' disciple, that he transmitted the oral law and he commanded in it. So he transmitted the oral law that God gave him on the Mount Sinai when he came off the mount. He gave Joshua the oral law. He commanded it in his ear, and then he commanded it to him. This is the further indication by the very first Mishnah in Avos, which I just read to you, which states clear that Moses passed the Torah to Joshua. It may be that the Ramban's source for his assertion that responsibility of the oral law was placed particularly in the hands of Joshua in Sifri Pinchas. There we are told that when Moses was commanded to designate Joshua as his successor, he was commanded, instruct him concerning what's called the Talmud, which we'll get into that later. I'll get into all of that, but it's part of the Torah, the writings of the Torah. This, the Rambam interprets as a clear inference of the oral law, because the Talmud is the oral law in its discussion. That's the reason why we don't have any need to read it. A lot of Gentiles want to get into Talmud study. There's a few places in there that pertains to us, but there's really not enough to go out and try to study it. It's just a few paragraphs in places that discusses our observance of the 7 laws. This would explain why Israel was so incensed when Joshua forgot. This is part of Israel's tradition. That Joshua forgot 300 laws following the death of Moses, that there were some who even threatened to kill him. Why the wrath against Joshua alone when there were myriads of other scholars and elders in the nation who were equally guilty? Because as the leader of the people, Joshua had been made responsible for the preservation of the holy oral law. See what I got here. I'll read this next section here, and then we'll have some discussion, Scotty. The oral law was taught in its entirety to Moses during the 40 days and the 40 nights in heaven. Even that a faithful disciple will in the future expound in front of his master was already disclosed to Moses at Sinai. That's in the Yerushalayim Peah 6:2. Not only the basic exegenic laws or interpretations, but every possible nuance and logical extension of the existing principles, even those that will be expounded in academies in the future. We're talking about even Israel. It is known that Israel, even in the world to come, will still be studying the Torah. That's how eternal this is, that the priests of God will continually be studying the Torah even beyond this world, but into the next. We're all included in the oral Torah that Moses accepted at Sinai. We all are. He didn't even leave out, even though he did not give this to the nations as a responsibility, that doesn't mean he left us out. He gave the priests the teachings to teach to us. When one considers the origins of the hundreds and the thousands of volumes that constitute only a fraction of the total body of knowledge. I mean, imagine you see the books behind Bob there and the books behind Scotty. Can you imagine that, 100,000 fold doesn't even begin to touch the volumes of the knowledge that Israel has gained from 3,000 years of studying the written and the oral? I mean, there's stuff, and my first rabbi said, there's things you will never hear of in this lifetime that we have pulled out of the Torah God gave us at Sinai, because it's so voluminous. Goes on and says, here's when one considers the origin of the hundreds and thousands of volumes that constitute only a fraction of the total body of the knowledge that we refer to, all the inclusive name of Torah. It's all Torah. It's all instruction. The phenomena of Moses knowing it all is not surprising. Understand that what's taken 3,000 years for the rest of Israel to etch out, Moses did not only know that, he knew more. That's how the mind of Moses was so expanded because of the presence of God that he was in. It's Moses knowing it all is not surprising. In essence, the Torah is the wisdom of God, the ultimate in spiritual greatness. Unlike material things, spirituality is indivisible. A car, a house, a space satellite, a pair of shoes. These are all separate objects bearing no conceivable relationship to one another. But the performance of any deed prescribed, and this is one of their books, the Shulchan Aruch, it's one that they study daily. It's the laws of daily living. It translates to set a table. The compendium of Jewish law, whether it's fasting on Yom Kippur, donning tefillin daily, the sort of act commonly called a religious observance for the Jewish people, or determining who is liable for a damage caused by cracked pavement or refraining from gossip, but very mundane task, becomes a spiritual act because it is a physical embodiment of a divine will. Do you hear what he's saying here? Or determining. See, let's get past the spiritual spiritual aspects that the Jewish people do, like wearing tefillin and things like that. That's part of their religious thing. So we drop even down to a mundane thing. A crack in the pavement or refraining from gossip or other mundane tasks becomes a spiritual act because it is a physical embodiment of the divine will. So a crack in the pavement appears and someone is hurt is a physical embodiment of the divine will because there's rules pertaining to that. Spirituality is inevitably because ultimately all spirituality derives from God himself. People may walk different paths in the service of God. Get that? People may walk different paths in the service of God. But as long as they are seeking his closeness in his ways, hallowed by the Torah, they are all united in a single pursuit of the same goal. They are like spokes of a wheel, but in a very real sense, they are even more unified than that because at its source, the Torah is God's wisdom, his own thought. So you see, those of us in the nations, when we observe our parts of the Torah, which is not as great as theirs because theirs pertains to the priesthood, ours pertains to making humanity harmonize. We spread across a vast earth, and our Torah allows us to live, whether it's in the United States or if it's in Canada, it's in the Philippines, it's in China, it's in Brazil, it's at the North Pole, it's the South Pole. It doesn't matter where we're at on the earth. Our core part of the Torah allows for us to live in harmony and peace and walk with God, which is great. We don't have to have all the commandments God gave Israel to live where we live and to do our job. They have to have it to do their job as priests, but we're human beings. I've got some stuff I'm working on one and right on that really is going to get into this aspect about us being human beings. What is the will of God for the average human being that he created? It's important. You've got an oak tree. You've got a corn stalk. You got a raccoon. We're going to get into that when we get into Exodus chapter 1. All three of them are creating according to the will of God, each one living according to the laws of God that he placed on that life to do what it's meant to do. You'll never see a corn stalk and a head of corn come out of an oak tree. And you'll never see acorn coming out of a grapevine. And you won't see a kangaroo coming out of a raccoon. Why? Because each was created according to God's will and plan, and he placed within each one of those a set of laws so that thing could exist according to his will. And we as the nations are no different than Israel. He has a plan for them, and he has a plan for us. We are not to think we're left out because they're the priests. Remember, they have one nation. God gave them to live the Torah in. He gave us the rest of the world to live a section of the Torah in. That's a great responsibility on us because we are the largest part of the human part of God's creation. And so our laws are very important. Our way of life is very important. And could you imagine what this earth would be like if what are we at, Bob, 4 trillion now on the earth, and you take just a couple million out for the Jewish people? I think we're like 4 to 6 trillion on the earth. And could you imagine all of us walking with God, observing the commandments of no theft, no murder, all the craziness because forbidden sexual relations and ideas is not expanded upon? We have laws of justice to make sure things are done right. Could you imagine what this earth would look like if we observed the Torah we were given? Even though it seems small, the impact is infinitely mind-boggling of what 7 commandments could do. Just 7, what it could do to a world. And this was in the blueprint, the master's blueprint that we're going to be getting into in the text. Go ahead, Scotty. I know I went a tad over, but I got what I was going to cover next week covered. So, hey, we can get to move on.
So I got a couple things, and I think it's going to take a little time to cover this, so I just want to present this to you and let you start off next week with this.
Yeah, we can have discussion on a lot of this next week if we need to at the beginning, because I know I covered more than a mouthful.
Well, there's a couple of conversations, and there's no way we can cover them tonight. So you got a pencil ready?
Yep, hold on.
Okay.
I got my own pencil and notebook. Let me flip my page. Whoops. Well, my book's got stuff scattered all over it for me.
Okay.
I'm reading my book on taking notes, and I'm taking notes. And
so we're going to start at Mount Sinai. I think that's where this question is going to start at. So the Creator gave Moses on Mount Sinai Torah, but he gave him something else too, right? A couple other things.
The written in the oral.
Okay. So I want to cover that a little bit, but yeah. So was any of the former text, Genesis up to Exodus, was it written down prior to Moses?
Yes, there was a section of it that was written. Remember, as I said earlier, when we get to like Genesis chapter 12, the shift of the Torah shifts toward Abraham, and then it shifts. Abraham had many children, boys and girls, men and ladies, however you want to put it. But he had one line through Isaac, and that line became the Jewish people. Just that one line. All the rest of Abraham's children was not, quote, as we call it today in terminology, Jewish. Only well, when it starts shifting, God is forming through Abraham this nation. And we're going to see in the creation week, there's a statement in there that applies to Israel. And I've read it. And when I read it, and we all read it, and we look at it, you're going to have an aha moment, because I had one when I sent it, and it pertains only to Israel. And it's interesting, all the way in the creation week. But when he gets on into the lineage of Isaac, and they begin to travel, and coming out of Egypt, going down to Egypt, coming out of Egypt, all that's part of it. And you start getting into the Exodus aspect of it. We know that it says also that in Genesis 18, which we'll get into, that, God loved, or, it says love, but it has a deeper meaning. We'll get into that when we get there into the Hebrew. But for all intents and purposes, I'm saying God loved Abraham because he taught his children in his household the way of God. That meant he taught the line that would become Israel and all those others that would become parts of the nations, the way of God. We're going to look at that when we get there. It'll be a little bit, but when we get there. I'm saying all of that is because in their journey, I believe, I'll have to go back and look at to make sure. Bob can probably correct me here on this. I believe it was when they were at the waters of Marah, bitter waters. I believe it was there. We are told by the sages that Moses began to write down. And when he wrote down, he was writing down the 7 commandments, because Israel at that time was commanded to observe the 7 commandments like the rest of us. It was expounded after Mount Sinai for them, but they were to be observed that. And if I remember right, it says there that, and I've got it all in my notes and everything and highlighted in my books. I can read it exactly when we get to it, but paraphrasing it, the sages teaches us at that point, he wrote down, it may not have been the waters of Marah, because he wrote down from Genesis 1 to Exodus 20, I think it was. There's a place where Israel was at when God wrote, when Moses wrote from Genesis 1, actually, down in the tablet, because he read it to the people. And I believe the sages says from what we call today, Genesis 1 to Exodus 20. I believe, if I remember right, I've got it all down where I can actually quote it precisely when and where. But I'm just going off the top of my head right now from what I remember. So yes, the part of the writing down was given to Moses to do prior Mount Sinai.
Okay. So another thing to cover is you talked about the 7 laws just then. And, everybody asked this question. And this is one I know we're going to have to, it's just too vast. What was the shape of the world prior to the giving of the commandments? And was that the reason the commandments were given, because the world was in such a shape?
No, as we remembered that the commandments preexisted existence.
Yeah. So
the commandments has nothing to do with what man did to the creation and himself. The commandments were there before the existence of anything. Remember, for there to be nothing, there has to be something, and it existed before there was nothing. It's okay. That's you're going to bang your head on the wall with that, but that's just
so. Yeah, so
we're going to be looking at that when we get into Genesis chapter 1, when we're talking about Bereshit, the first word. Rabbi Hirsch gets into that, and I got into a little bit of it tonight. No, actually, there's a little bit more actually when we get into, before I read that first passage. There's some here in the Artscroll Tanach series about that very subject. But no, before God put into being anything what we would call physical, the commandments already existed. They weren't given because man failed. They were in existence before man even was brought into being, before the first physical atom existed. And I'm talking about atom, neutrons, protons, not atom. Before the first physical smallest part of, before there was light and before there was darkness, and even it gets into that. Darkness is a creation. Before anything, there was not even darkness. That's why, in my own language, I put, before there was nothing, there was nothing. That's the only way I know how you can put it. But yes, it has absolutely, and the 7 commandments isn't given to the nations like the 10 commandments are actually 10 sayings. They're not commandments. The word mitzvah is not there. The varim. They're statements. They're sayings, which we can get into that. Look at Exodus 20 and all of that. If you want it, we can look into that sometime, and I can show you how that was given to Israel and not the nations. That section was given to Israel as part of their covenant, not ours. And so our commandments they pre-existed inside the Torah, but they were not revealed the same way as the commandments was given to Israel. Before Sinai, they were, how the sages put it, they were given based on the growth of man's experience with God, his relationship. As man's relationship with God grew, so did the understanding. And I brought it out before in the past. When we get to Genesis chapter 2:16, you'll understand a lot of this, because that day, that event was major. We're gonna look into that when we get to Genesis chapter 2, that text. We're going to break it down. We're going to look at it. We're going to understand it. And once you begin to understand that, then when you look at when Adam said that, that a man shall leave his mother and his father and his house and come cleave unto his wife, that we begin to understand that Adam already knew that it was a man and a woman who made a family, and there are rules pertaining to that. And as part of our forbidden sexual laws comes from that, which Adam already knew, and which he told his children. And so all of that was, all pre the giving of the Torah. Because you got to understand, when we read Genesis, all of that stuff had already happened. God's just told him to write down what had already happened. But the existence of the commandments was pre-existence of man, pre-existence of creation. And that's why part of the interpretation of, the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, is misinterpreted, because they think that the commandments was given based on man's falling. No. Man's falling did not affect the Torah. The Torah existed before the fall. And we also understand that when God gave us his attributes, where it says Hashem, Hashem, God, God, it mentions it twice. I am the God before the fall, and I am the God after the fall. And he's loving kindness and all of that. And we see that our fall had no effect on the Torah. And so, and it wasn't given at Mount Sinai because of the deficiency of man. It was laid out before. And we'll even understand that when we read a certain thing in the creation week. Something that was stated that did not happen until Israel. And it just goes to show you that the whole Torah was made for Israel. That's a hard thing for us to understand, because we pick up the Bible and we read it and we think, oh, God wrote this to me. Nope. He wrote it to Israel. We're guests. Go ahead, Scotty.
All right, let's see.
Good night, Emuela.
Good night, Emuela, honey.
Hope you get a night's sleep.
All right. Well, Terry, I'm going to bring it to a close. We're now at 1 hour.
Did I stir it up a little bit more for you, Scotty?
No. I think as you cover these things in their entirety and full as we go through, I think it will. It's going to be a fascinating discussion.
Yep.
So
as I go through these overviews, I'm hoping they will. Please write down questions you have, thoughts that you may have. If you want me to go back and cover something, that's why if I've said something in my reading, you want me to go back and reread so you can write it down, we can do that, next week. I'm doing this before we get into the text, because this knowledge is important according to the text. But once we get into the text and we study the text, you'll go, oh, yeah, now I see why it says what it says. You see, you know where I'm going with that. It's going to help you understand when we get to the text that this is the stuff that the Jewish people have understood for, over 3,000 years. We're the Johnny come latelys, but that's all right. We're invited to the party.
Yeah. All right.
Look at Bob. He's dancing. He's ready to go.
Yeah. So, all right, Terry. Well, I'm going to bring us to a close, and just everybody come back next week. And
this is going to be a good journey into Genesis, guys. We're going to have some really good discussions on some major things that we've been taught and we have believed. And we're going to see that the text actually says something different that is important for your relationship between you and the Creator. And it's going to be some of this stuff is going to be so wonderful. It's going to be so amazing that you're going to love your God a whole lot more.
Ronald's got his hand up.
Go ahead, Ronald.
Fred asked a question on YouTube. You want me to read it out?
Oh, yeah. I didn't see it. Go ahead.
Wasn't the Torah offered to the 70 nations, but they rejected it? But the Jewish people openly accepted it at Mount Sinai.
Yeah, we'll get into that part of it. We can get into it later. It talks a little bit more. But yes, according to the sages, the Creator did offer it unto the nations, and there was ways certain nations questioned about certain things, and they wanted part of it. They didn't want this part or that part. But Israel, when they said that, what was it? How they put it? It says, what you said we will hear and we will do, or something. I'm just misquoting it probably horribly right there, but we'll read that. Israel accepted it accepted it. They just, in a holy manner, they accepted it. And it was amazing on what happened, but in a holy manner, they accepted it. We questioned, they didn't question, which doesn't make us wrong in questioning certain things. But the way they received the Holy Torah, they was as a holy people received it in a holy way. And I thank God for that. And he gave it to the one people that way. Millions of people, or trillions of people all over the world, we what the hat that Israel kept, and they're the people of the book. They've been called the people of the book. And I've got a friend in New Jersey. He's a Levite. He knows his place within the house of Israel. He's told me that when, if he's alive at the time that the temple was being reconstructed, he would be called back to Jerusalem, which is where he was born and raised, just outside of Jerusalem, that he would be given duties to do as a Levite. And there are times when I'm wishing him a good Shabbat, and he'll send me pictures of his Shabbat table and his kids when they're on Friday and they're out shopping and stuff. He'll send me pictures and that stuff. And I've thanked him time and time again. I thanked him. I says, I just want to thank you from a Gentile Jew to a Jew. Thank you for keeping your covenant, because if you don't keep your covenant, we can't do ours, because there will be nobody to teach us it. There will be nobody to teach us our responsibility before God if the Jews disobey their covenant. He's one of them that walks in the covenant he was given, Mount Sinai. He knows his place in Israel as a Levite. And I've thanked him many times. Thank you for keeping your covenant, because it makes it possible for me to learn mine and do my part of the covenant, which we'll get into when we get into Genesis 9. So anyhow, Scotty.
All right. Well, everybody, we'll see you next week.
Oh, Veronica said 8 billion as of
8 billion as of 2023.
I mean trillion.
Oh, billion? Trillion.
That's trillion.
Trillion. Okay.
Trillion. Thank you, Veronica.
I have to take off my shoes to count that high, Veronica.
I run out of
Everybody
fingers
else
and
is
toes. I get out of,
All